when she left, I threw myself on the ground and I looked up to heaven and I just kind of poured my heart out to God and told him that I wanted him, but that I wanted to know him. I didn't want to just know like how to do these things. I wanted to experience him in a different way. And so I told him, like, show up.
Right.
Like, if I want to know who you really are. Like, I'm tired of just knowing this. Like, I want to know who you really are. And out loud, I'm like, okay, God, if you want me to go here, you're gonna have to be so real, so like clear with me that I have no doubts in my mind that this is you. Because like I was already thinking I was crazy, and I knew that everyone else was gonna think I was crazy too.
Welcome everyone to the One with Friend podcast, episode number 3. In this episode, we have a special guest with us today, and I want to welcome it. Gabby, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Thanks. I'm doing good. I noticed you didn't know what last name to say anymore.
Yeah, it's a little complicated. So I was like, should I just say Cano? Or should I just tell her? So how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Just doing some stuff in the house today. The weather is actually really nice today where I live. So hopefully after this, I can go out, take a walk, do
Cool.
something.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate for you accepting the invitation, and I just want to say that I'm very thankful for you to taking your own time for being in this episode today. So let's just start off with tell me, introduce yourself and introduce your congregation and who are your pastors as well.
Yes. Okay. So I'm Gabby Bruchemann, how it's said in Dutch,
Okay.
but previously Cano Lagos. The name changed sometimes. I forget.
It's
So
just
it's a bit interesting. I'm living in Amsterdam right now.
wow.
It's in the Netherlands in Europe, right by Germany, and me and my husband are part of Credo Church, and our pastors are Enzo and Sandy Pignato. She's Dutch and he's Italian,
Interesting.
and from Belgium. So it's a whole thing.
Yeah, I can imagine. But that's very cool. As a lot of you heard, she's in Amsterdam, but we will get to that later on. So, okay, Gabby. So let's start it and tell me about your upbringing. Let's start from the beginning.
Okay, so I was raised in South Florida to two Honduran parents, so very Hispanic household, speaking only Spanish all the time. And it wasn't until I was about I remember there was maybe 2 instances in my childhood that I went to church, and in those 2 times, it just happened that God would gave special words to my dad because we weren't in our childhood. We didn't go to church. We were
Right.
like straight up in the world. And then when I think I was like around 7 or 8, we ended up moving to where my parents live now in Port St. Lucie, and my grandma would go to church and some lady would pick her up, and yeah, I went the first time, and then the reason I kept going is because I thought a guy there was cute and she thought I was cute. So I was young. I wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily there for God.
Right.
But my family didn't go to church. It was just my grandma, and my dad at all did not go to church. And my mom, she didn't really have she had a background with religion, but more I don't, it's a different religion, to say it like that.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so but she never really wanted to be a part of that religion back in Honduras. So I think apart from that, from my understanding, she has no really background with religion. So yeah, my upbringing, yeah, it wasn't until I was like 8, I think, that God kind of finally called my dad back and convinced him. And then from then, our whole family was kind of, yeah, brought into church and
Right.
knowing about God. And I have 3 siblings, 2 younger brothers, even though I forget that sometimes now, and 1 older
Yeah.
sister. And yeah, it was us and my mom and my dad and our family.
Oh, good. So tell me a little about you said that you mentioned that your dad is a pastor. So how was that calling? How was his call?
The calling for my dad.
Yes, the calling from your dad. Yeah.
Okay, well, he actually came to knew of God when he was maybe a teen in Honduras.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually, through him, God used him to bring my grandma and his siblings to church, and to really know God because they were part of the Catholic Church in the past. But
Right.
he really brought them to the evangelical church, and to really know God in a different way. And
Mm-hmm.
then when he left Honduras at 18 to come get the American dream,
Right.
he kind of departed from the ways of God. And yeah, he lived his life as any young person usually does in the
Mm-hmm.
world, doing crazy things. And but from what he tells us, God was always, he never forgot about God, even though he wasn't living the way that he maybe should have. And so God was always kind of, as he always does to us, uh, he's always trying to pursue us, you know, trying to show us that he loves us.
Right.
And yeah, we ended up, when we were living in West Palm Beach, which is where we were born, me and my siblings. Um, my dad had a company that he was starting, and basically he had a lot of like moments where like he would just feel attacked. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't like really have peace.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't feel peace in a lot of ways, and I think he ended his really expensive machines from his company ended up getting stolen, and I think that was the last straw for him, which is
Yeah.
why we ended up moving to Port St. Lucie. But I think God used my grandma to kind of remind him about like who he was and things like that. Well, this is just from my memory, you
Right.
know. Um, and so then when my grandma started going to church when we lived in Port St. Lucie, other people would God would kind of use other people to try to talk to my mom, try to talk to my grandma, try to like evangelize to my mom and things like that. But my dad never really wanted anything to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So often, sometimes we would go to church with just my mom, but my dad, he never wanted anything to do with it because my dad's also a very serious man. That he's like, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to say something, I'm going to be a person of my word, and he
Okay.
didn't want to just like
Right. Right.
play with fire. So yeah, eventually uh eventually God did finally break him down to the point where he had nowhere else to go, and he did end up giving his life to God. And
Mm-hmm.
he was just very, very faithful, my dad. He was very serving at the church, and like he wasn't looking to be a pastor. He was just very faithful, like the right hand man of like uh yeah, of the pastor that was there.
Right.
Then that pastor ended up leaving to another state. Then the church didn't have a pastor anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
then the senior pastor of the whole entire church sent someone else. But then my dad was still like the right hand man, always like being there, responsible and things like that. And then that pastor, after a couple of years, didn't end up working out for like some reasons. And then the senior pastor was like, "Hey, you've been faithful, you've been there." And yeah, then eventually my dad started pastoring. It feels like so long ago now. It's crazy.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Well, now that you address, the your background now let's start with your own testimony.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
I mean, I know there's so much to talk about, but let's just start with you, like with your ministry. Where do your ministry started?
um, I would say that at the right around the age of 8, I kind of, or 9, I honestly don't remember, it's all a blur, but it was around there, 8, 9, 10.
Mm-hmm.
I started learning piano because my sister was learning piano at the time from some guy that was also Christian, but
Mm-hmm.
I think at this time my dad still wasn't a believer. And so i I would always sit with her in her lessons, and it seems like as if I was more interested in the lessons than my sister
Right.
herself. So my dad ended up noticing that and taking her out of the lessons and putting me in it. And at that time, then eventually my dad did give his heart back to God, and like he was very serious. So all of us, from the moment he became Christian again, we all had to go to church forcibly.
Wow.
And so I remember going, and I was like often like so bored, as like a young kid is, like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really want to be there. And I would see my siblings often put their hands up when in the worship time and the singing in the worship time, and I never understood it. I was like, why are you doing that? Like, why are you lifting your
Right.
hands up? That's kind of weird. That's kind of sus. And I think my dad even yelled at me one time. He reprimanded me because I wasn't doing it either, but I didn't understand why it needed to be done because
Right.
I didn't want to be there. And I remember that I was taking as I was taking my piano lessons, I would have to practice, and we had a guest room at our house at the time, and that's where I would practice because then I wouldn't bother anyone. And I remember that usually the guy, when I had my piano lessons, he would sing and I would play. I would only play. I never tried singing. And I remember that day I was practicing, and I just had the idea of, maybe I should sing. And I was alone. Nobody was there.
Right.
And so I started singing a song called Te Amo. It's super old and super, super simple.
Mm-hmm.
But I was learning how to play that, and I just started, I tried to sing it as I was playing it. And it was the first time that I felt the Holy Spirit ever.
Wow.
And I remember so vividly that the Holy Spirit just fell on me as I was singing those simple words like Te amo, te amo. And yeah, I think it's very special to me because God has very God has a lot of plans with all of us, right? But with me, I've seen that I have a calling specifically within worship ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So to have the first time ever that I encounter like God and Jesus like in a real way, be in a moment where it's just me alone trying to figure out this song. Yeah, I think it's very symbolic to me now. So yeah. Then eventually I joined at the church. Well, I was a pastor's kid, so I had to do everything. Me and my siblings had to do everything. So we had to put chairs. We had to, there was a lot of things. But because I was like more focused on the music aspect of it, it was natural that I was put on the worship team, and I started to learn how to lead. And I had to, be with the help of your dad, actually, doing learning how to sing and learning how to, those are crazy memories. And then I lived the life that any pastor's kid kind of has. You kind of just go to church. You have your times where you don't really want to be there at all. You want to go do something else. Then when you get older as a teenager, you want to go out with friends, and you can't go. But in my case, we couldn't go out with our friends. Between me and my siblings, I feel like I was the more social one, so I had more invitations to do things out, and it frustrated me even more that I couldn't do anything because I had to go to church, and it was very, very annoying to me
when
at the time.
when you were at school, I know that this is very common for the youth at that era. Were you ashamed at first to say that you were a Christian or to say that you were a pastor's kid?
I think even up until it wasn't up until high school that I let like literally 2 people in and told them that I was Christian. Like, I was ashamed all throughout middle school, all throughout high school. Well, more towards the end of high school, I was a little less ashamed. But it was definitely something that I didn't mention to anyone. And the last thing I wanted people to find out was that I was a pastor's kid, and that I couldn't hang out because I had to go to church because my parents didn't let me. It was a really big issue for me at the time. So I really didn't let anyone in that time.
Wow. Yeah, because I went through the same. So I went through the same phase. So I completely understand what you say. But tell me a little more. So after, let's say, you finish high school, now you feel more comfortable with sharing to people that you're a Christian. Maybe at the time you didn't say that you're a pastor's kid, but after high school was finished, how do you manage to keep your life with Christ? Because you went to college, and how was the separation from your parents at the time?
Okay, well, I do want to say that towards the end of high school, like I said, I was getting more and more um like getting used to
Yeah.
saying that I was a believer and being
Mm-hmm.
more like okay with it,
Yeah.
because I had a friend Nick at the time, and he went to a uh, American Christian church, and
I see.
it's very different from what I've noticed than in my experience. He was very proud to say that he was a Christian. He was
Mm-hmm.
very proud, and like that's one of the things that we as friends bonded over, because I feel like I didn't have that with literally anyone else at the church. I mean, at the school. So in that time, I was, what's it called? I was trying to figure out what I was going to do after high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to go to a university super far away in another state because I wanted to freedom. And anyways, long story short, God
Right.
started showing himself to me in very real, crazy, supernatural ways that led me to go to the university that I went to, called Southeastern University, SEU, in
Mm-hmm.
Lakeland, Florida. So it was a Christian private university.
Wow.
So even though maybe I was like having a lot of questions about my faith or if I wanted God or things like that,
Yeah.
that was my decision. You know, I could have said, no, God, like I'll go somewhere else. But I feel like God was he was very real in trying to show me who he was. And
Mm-hmm.
I ended up going there. So then I moved out when I was 18. And my sister, my older sister,
Mm-hmm.
she's 2 years older than me, and she was still living at home. So I was basically the first one out of the house. And yeah, it was interesting change in dynamic for my family, but they were supporting me, especially because I decided to stay in Florida. They were very happy. I remember that when I first went to SEU, as one does at that age, you don't know who you are. You don't know like what you stand for. And
Mm-hmm.
even though I was going to a Christian university, like there's still, even in the Christian world, there's still people who uh, say one thing and then are living a different way in the other side of things,
Right.
right? And there's also different like denominations, like Baptists, like Assemblies of God, like
Right.
just
Right.
a
Right.
lot of different things like within the church community. And so like yeah, it was really weird for me because I didn't it was it was the first time that I had to make friends. Oh no, second time in my life that I had to make friends from scratch. So
Mm.
you don't know anyone. So you're just trying to fit in, and that's a lot of what I was trying to do when I first got there. I was just trying to fit in. I just wanted people to like me, but I didn't know who I was. I wasn't allowed to wear makeup before I left. I wasn't allowed to wear
Wow.
certain things before I left. You know, like, and these were normal things to people at the university, but for me, because of the way
Yeah.
that I was raised, that wasn't normal to me. So I started wearing more makeup. I remember I chopped my hair off. Like it was
Wow.
a lot of like dramatic things. And they weren't necessarily bad, but
Mm-hmm.
I was like testing all these waters that I had never been able to test before,
Correct.
you know? And like, even with like hanging out with guys, I wasn't officially allowed to date before that, you know. Even then,
Yeah.
my parents were still like, just focus on school,
Right.
you
Right.
know. And there was, yeah. And now everything was open to me. I could do anything I wanted, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And you know, that's a very interesting way to be brought up, you know.
Yeah.
And like now looking back, I wish I would have known more about the world in itself, not necessarily going to sin and going to do things like that, but
Correct.
like it was such a rough transition to just go
Yeah.
straight into, okay, I can do whatever now, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had to learn. And that first year, I I still hadn't found a church that I really was going to often, and and I was, like I said, hanging out with friends a lot. I was doing my classes that I had to do, but I was
Mm-hmm.
more than anything hanging out with friends. Like that's what I
Wow.
was doing. And so I was going to parties, and I was yeah, doing like social things that were just happening at the university. And I remember that, so uh in parentheses, I remember my dad saying on the day that he dropped me off at the university that I just kidding. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something about like uh no te seques como una chuleta. Like, don't get so
Dry.
like basically like take care of yourself. Like, you
Right.
need to seek God. Like, you need to spend time with him.
Right.
And even like growing up, because I was at the church building so often, or at church events so often, the last thing I wanted to do was spend time with God when I was at home.
Right.
I literally never picked up my Bible when I was at home. Well, not never, but almost never.
What?
Like, I didn't pray when I was at home. Like, the last thing I wanted to do, I wanted to know nothing about God. Once I got home, once I was at school, like, I wanted to know nothing about God because I felt like it took so much of my life, and I didn't have a choice in it. So when I left, then I was like, okay, now I can do whatever I want.
Right.
And I remember at the end of that first year, there was a moment that I came to where I felt so empty. So it was just such a empty feeling, I was so sad. I didn't know why I was sad. I felt like I was alone, even though I wasn't alone. Like, it was just a lot of feelings that I was going through. And I could just explain it as like a dark, like, what is it called? Like a dark hole in the ground, and then you're in there all the way at the bottom, and like nobody, like, that's how I felt in the moment. And I remembered what my dad had said about me. I should take care of myself. I need to pray and things like that. But because I didn't have the discipline of that before,
Right.
I didn't keep up with it that whole first year that I was there. I couldn't, because I never had the discipline of it. And I think even in the past, like, I didn't really make that decision for myself of saying, God, I want to follow you because it's my own choice. And so I had that moment in my university, in my dorm. I waited till my roommate left. And then when she left, I threw myself on the ground and I looked up to heaven, and I just kind of poured my heart out to God and told him that I wanted him, and that I told him that I knew all the songs, that I knew the ways that I had to live. I knew what I had to do to make him happy, but that I wanted to know him. I didn't want to just know, like, how to do these things. I wanted to experience him in a different way. And so I told him, like, show up.
Right.
Like, if I want to know who you really are. Like, I'm tired of just knowing this. Like, I want to know who you really are. And yeah, I can say that that's the day that I truly did give my heart and my life to God. And from then, I could see where I would just have the idea of, like, let me go to breakfast and let me take my Bible. Okay. And then I'd open my Bible, and then I'd feel so happy inside, like this joy that I couldn't explain. And then I'd realize, oh, that's the Holy Spirit. Oh, you're happy about this. This is good. you know? Or even times I started, like, in university, it's very hard to, like, find alone time.
Right.
And so what I started doing is I bought journals, and I would pray in my journals instead of praying out loud, because I'm living with people, and, like, you don't want to bother other people. So I'd sit up with my headphones and I'd be crying, but I'd be writing in my journal. So nobody knew what was going on, but I was having my time with God. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, God. Yeah, that's when my life really, I gave it to God, and I wanted to make him proud, even though I made mistakes, but still, I wanted to really make him proud.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So before, you said that you didn't have any time with God, and that also would include not going to church. But after you had that encounter with God, that's where you started looking for a church, or were you already were going to a church?
Well, actually, throughout that, even in my university, we had services throughout the week that were available on the campus themselves. So I also went to that, but it was also important to go to an actual church. So I had been going to different churches. I just didn't feel like I had found the church, that I wanted, or that I felt like God was leading me to. And I ended up finding this church one weekend where my sister came to visit me, and we ended up going, and they were like, I was looking for a Hispanic church because that's what I grew up with. I didn't really know anything else. So I went, and I ended up going to this Puerto Rican pastor's church. And come to find out that this pastor knows our senior pastor from back then,
Mm-hmm.
and somehow there's a connection. And I don't even know how we found that. I think my dad actually found the guy, that pastor's
Oh, wow.
church, and I ended up going.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that's the church that I ended up serving and really attending for the next years that I was in that town for university.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So, okay, so now let's get into the reason why you're in Amsterdam. The calling of going as a missionary to that place. Where did that the original, like, was that an idea that you got, or was an actual, God saying they need you over there?
Yeah, so since my university was Christian, we often had the opportunity to go on many different mission trips.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we went on many different mission trips. And through one of those mission trips that I had previously taken here in Europe for 2019, I came to the Netherlands, France, and I went to Spain, and it was a month-long trip.
Wow.
And through this trip, I was able to meet the pastor of the church that I'm currently serving at and
Mm-hmm.
attending. And yeah, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a dream that I had, because I never thought that I would leave the country.
Mm-hmm.
My plan was always to work in the music industry, and as I was getting closer to graduating, like that desire only like grew more and more, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a dream necessarily, but a year before I was graduating, I kind of was talking to God and asking him, like, okay, what are the next steps? What's the plan? What are we going to do? Because I had really loved being in Nashville, where I was interning at the time. I really loved it there, and I wanted to return. So yeah, then I ended up I couldn't stop thinking about the pastor and his church for like about a week. Like every single day they were on my mind, and I was like, this is weird. Why am I thinking about
Right.
them? I literally only was there for a week here in the Netherlands that first time. So I'm like, this is weird. So I messaged him on Facebook, and he tells me that he was like, hey, why don't you come over here as a missionary? And he had been praying at the time for God to send people to the church, because the church, they had just planted the church, so it was still brand new, and they were not that they were looking, but they were asking for God to bring people that would help build the
Mm-hmm.
church here. And so he was like, just pray about it, fast, we're gonna fast with you, and let me know what God tells you. And so in the moment, I was like, oh, okay, this sounds like a cool opportunity, living
Right.
in another country. Wow, like Europe. And I love traveling. Like, I love getting on an airplane and traveling. It's one of my favorite things ever. So I was like, but then after 5 minutes, I was like, realistically, I don't know about this. I don't know about this.
You're right.
So I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell anyone about this until like a month later, and it still wasn't a lot of people. It was like
Right.
my friends or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. But yeah, it was never in the plans.
Okay, and how would and then the confirmation? How was the actual day where that got confirmed to you that it was his will for you to be over there?
Yeah, so after that first phone call, it was about God confirmed to me about 2 months after that. In between that time, because I was like, I don't really know if this is like gonna happen. I don't really know if I really want to do that,
Right.
because also living as a missionary means that you have to live off of other people's fund, other people donating to you, and
Mm-hmm.
like that just seems so not nice. Like, I just want to make my own money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really doubting it, and really I didn't tell a lot of people, because I was like, if it's not something serious, why am I going to bring it up? Not even my parents knew. And I also didn't want a lot of people to give me their opinions because everyone has opinions. I didn't want people to give me their opinions and influence me in a way that would make me do things like because of my feelings and not God guiding me.
Right.
So yeah, I had decided that I was going to stay here in the U.S. and I was gonna move to Nashville and do my life there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I had avoided the pastor for like a month and a half, so I didn't text him. He didn't text me. Like, he would message me sometimes, and I wouldn't answer because I didn't want to let
Yeah.
him down. Like, no, sorry, I'm not gonna go. And then I remember that in January of 2020, he messaged me and he was like, "Hey, we haven't talked in a while. Let's talk." And then I ended up telling him how I was feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and God was using him to tell me like, "Hey, you're just scared, but like, what if this is really God?" And so he
Mm-hmm.
said, "Just pray about it. Ask God for guidance, because he's like, we want you to be led by God, not by anything we want or whatever." So I was like, "Okay, cool."
Mm-hmm.
I get off the phone. I'm walking around my apartment. I'm like, out loud, I'm like, "Okay, God, if you want me to go here, you're gonna have to be so real, so like clear with me that I have no
Mm-hmm.
doubts in my mind that this is you." Because like I was already thinking I was crazy, and I knew that everyone else was gonna think I was crazy too.
Mm-hmm.
So exactly 1 week later, I was walking around my university with some of my best friends that are still my friends today, and we were gonna take pictures in front of a lake or something. And there was this couple that was sitting down in a bench nearby, and they were just looking at us. And I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna, okay, whatever.
Right.
And then eventually they find their way over to us, and the husband, they actually are from Australia. They live in Australia. They just came to visit for that weekend because they were coming to visit a family member. And he comes to me, he says, "I actually have a word for you." And he points to me, and I'm like, "Me?" And he starts basically giving me words of knowledge and starts telling me, like, I had a vision. And I don't know how detailed you want me to be in the vision. I could kind of cut it shorter.
You can be as
Um,
detailed as you want.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the vision, he said that he saw me holding both hands up, and then in one hand I had a torch, and in the other hand I had a microphone.
Mm-hmm.
He said that in the hand that I had the microphone, oh yeah, because I was studying for music business degree, so I
Right.
was looking to go into the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
He said, when you held the microphone up, I saw all your dreams come true. You reached high successes. You made so much money. You were very successful financially. Like everything, all the dreams that you had ever wanted came true.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw everything happen in front of your eyes, but deep down inside of you, you were not satisfied. And I said,
Wow.
"Huh?"
Wow.
And he said, "Yes, deep down you were not satisfied." And in the other hand, you held the torch. And he said, and he didn't even say anything about Amsterdam, right?
Mm-hmm.
But God is so and he didn't even say anything about these like plans that I had, or this decision that I had to make. But it was so
Mm-hmm.
cool because it was so clear that God was speaking. And then when he said, "You held the torch up," and I saw that when you held the torch up, um many girls and many women looked up to you, not because of who you were, but because of who you represented.
Wow.
And he said, and I see, and he said, "I saw that you um that God blessed you because of your obedience, and that was basically everything you would need." And he said some other things that just I can't remember right now, but I've told this story so much that I can't remember right now. But I remember it, he told me, like, if you go down this path, like like the one that God is taking you down, and you saying and you putting your things to the side, God will
Mm-hmm.
bless you, but more than you can even imagine, because
Wow.
you're obeying him. And I knew in that moment that the paths that he was talking about was me going to Nashville and pursuing my career
Right.
dreams, and me going to Amsterdam
Amsterdam.
and working here with this church, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't even know it. He didn't even know the places. But as he was speaking, in my heart, I made the decision of like, "No, God." As the Holy Spirit fell over me, I
Right.
said, "No, God." Like, there is nothing more that matters than being in your will. There's nothing more that I have to leave everything. If I have to leave everything, I will do it, because being in your will is gonna be the most rewarding thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I made the decision in that moment of like,
Wow.
well, I guess I'm moving to Amsterdam. And it was really it was really special too, because some of my best friends were
Mm-hmm.
there, and they were hearing all of this.
Wow.
And in the months after that, until I ended up moving, in the year time before I ended up moving, every time I had the voice of doubt in my head, that I had a lot,
Mm-hmm.
God would use them to remind me, "Hey, no, listen to what God said.
Yeah.
Listen to what God said. You've never seen this man in your life before. This man does not know your life. That was the Lord speaking through him.
Facts. Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
that's actually insane the way that God works. And then let me ask you, like, um what month that you actually move in, and the time that you were, preparing yourself to head out to Amsterdam, or to the Netherlands in this case. How was those months? Like, what was going through your mind at that time, and how did your
Yeah.
family react with the news?
Yeah. So that same day that God spoke to me, I ended up driving 2 hours to Port St. Lucie to talk to my parents because I wanted to tell them. Now I knew, now I thought, okay, God spoke to me. I told him to be super clear. Well, this man just randomly came up to me and it seems like he was super clear now.
Right.
So I was, when you're like sitting at the edge of your parents' bed and then you're like walking around their room, like you want to tell them something, but
Yeah.
you're kind of scared. So you're like,
You had
so you're
to,
kind of
yeah,
just
you had to sweet
wait.
talk your way.
Yeah. Oh, you had to find the nerve to finally say it. So then at, at the point I was 22.
Hmm.
I was 22. So was I 22? 23, 24. Yeah, I was 23. No, I was 22. I was 22. And I had to, like, I was an adult already at that point, but still, I was like,
Hmm.
you want your parents' approval and things like that. So
Right.
I had gone up to them and told them, and yeah, they were very surprised. They were like, because I hadn't mentioned this to literally anyone.
Right.
Because I'm like, this is not going to happen. Like, why am I going to tell them? And then 2 days later, I had went back to Lakeland, and my dad called me, and he was super emotional and angry, and that I can't listen. That anyways, he was not taking it well, and
Wow.
neither was my mom. They on the night of itself, my mom was more emotional than my dad was. My dad was very calm and just reserved and
Hmm.
collected, but then his emotions came out after. And then yeah, basically it was really hard from the moment that I told them to the moment to
Hmm.
about a week before I left, which uh, in the time frame it was about a year. It was about a year and a half, I think. And they were not happy. I almost never mentioned it to them that I was
Hmm.
going. I had moved back home so that I could save money and kind of figure out my steps to move out of the country.
Right.
And I never mentioned it to them. I never said anything about it to them because it was clear that they were not on the same page as me. They didn't agree with me going, and it was very, 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 very difficult. On top of that, I had family members that were talking bad about me, saying that I just
Wow.
wanted to be like an influencer and I just wanted to go and like not really work and like this and that.
Hmm.
Like it was very difficult. I had a lot of people showing their opinions and telling me
Hmm.
their unsolicited advice. But in that time, I would say that my dependency with God grew to a level that it never was before. Because where do you go when you have no one else that you can talk to about it? Like, where do you go?
Right.
And like my relationship with my parents, like I never really felt like I had the freedom to really talk to them about like my problems or how I was doing, because I felt like their reaction wasn't always the best, or it didn't like really,
Hmm.
it yeah. And so, and this topic was a touchy subject, so I just never brought it up with them. um and so, yeah, I had a lot of difficult moments where that brought me to the feet of God almost every single day.
Wow.
Multiple times a day, I would run to my room and I would just start crying out to God because, you know, there was so much that was happening, and so much fear that I felt, so much doubt that I sometimes felt again, even though God spoke to me before.
Hmm.
So much fear about the money aspect, like how will I get the money to do this? Like this is 3 years that I'm supposed to be here for this next time. I had decided that it would be 3 years. Like, are you kidding me? Like, also I'm
Yeah.
leaving my friends. Oh my gosh, like am I gonna find a man? Oh my gosh, what is happening? Like,
Yeah. All the doubts
it
coming
was
in.
so yeah, it was so 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 difficult. I started having anxiety,
Mm.
and I never had anxiety before. I started having panic attacks. I started having a lot of things like that. um Yeah. So if you ask me how it was very, very difficult. And I honestly would say, even moving here, like actually getting off the plane and getting here,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I would, whenever I hear people say that they want to be missionaries, I'm like, please, you
Yeah.
have no idea what this takes. You have no idea what this means. And I, like, there's a lot of people since I've been here that have said from the US
Right.
that they were going to move here. And I'm like, if God does truly not have
A plan.
like his hand on your life on this specifically for you to move as a missionary anywhere in the
Mm-hmm.
world, then you're not gonna, then it's not gonna go through, because it's so difficult. Like it's like the things that I have had to endure these past couple of years being here and even leading up to it, like
Right.
not just anyone can follow through, because it's difficult, it's very difficult.
And then later on, after after you deal with all of this, the moment that at what point, or what was the talk after with your parents saying like, okay, we don't like it, but we will support you in this decision of yours.
Yeah, so I was supposed to leave originally in June. I was
Mm-hmm.
supposed to move in June of 2021. And it was a month before that, and my parents sat me down and they realized that I was still planning on leaving.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, I hadn't been able to fundraise any money. So I literally had no money that I was
Wow.
able to fundraise. And they sat me down and they said, hey, but like if this is from God, then he would provide. So this is not from God.
Wow.
But I knew in my heart that it was God. And I didn't understand why the money wasn't coming in. I didn't understand why it wasn't happening. If I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
if this is you, God, why is it not happening? But I would just bring all these questions back to God. And then my dad, trying to support me, he said that he was going to try to put a pastor's prayer morning together to try, and then I can talk about my plans, and then maybe
Mm-hmm.
they could donate. Literally one pastor came.
Wow.
Only one pastor. It was so like even more evidence to my dad,
Mm-hmm.
for he thought it was evidence of like, this is not God, you know. Did I freeze?
No, no, you're good.
Okay. Like it was more evidence to him of like, this is not God, because if it was God, he would move the mountains, he would provide, financially. He knows you need this, blah blah blah. And he's like, I'm like, okay, well, God, I don't know what's happening. And then in July, the next month, I finally started getting donations in. Um, I finally started to see the money coming in from different people. And I remember it was a month before September when I had decided, I changed the date from July, and then I decided that I was going to go in September. It was a month before this September.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have like, so you can have like one-time donations, but because I was going to be a more of a long-term missionary, I needed monthly donations. So
Right.
I needed people to say, hey, I'm going to give you $100 for these next 3 years, or $100 for this next year. I like, even though people giving me $500 one time was
Mm-hmm.
great and it was helpful and I needed it, but I needed the monthly donations to make it more stable.
Right.
So I didn't have that many monthly donations. Um, I had literally two people, maybe my best friend who's still donating now, and one of my other friends that's still donating now. And I still had like a lot. I needed to raise around like 2,000 every month, and I had like
Wow.
$200
Whoa.
monthly donations. It was nothing.
Right.
So a month before I left, my dad, he was really, really trying to understand and really trying to be supportive, because
Mm-hmm.
he really didn't want me to leave. Um, he said, "Okay, me and your mom are gonna give you $1,000 from our own money every
Right.
month." He's like, "But just know that you can come back, and like it's not a failure if you come back." He was convinced I was gonna come back in like
Right.
2 months, you know. Um, so then I'm like, okay, like, and it honestly took like a little weight off my back, and
Mm-hmm.
even till today, like he's still donating, and it'll be um 3 years this September, and
Wow.
that's when his donations will stop. But um yeah, it was a whole thing. And then a week, and then that time I was still praying to God. God,
Mm-hmm.
I will leave without their blessing, because I know that this is you and you're so much bigger than they are. You will take care of that.
Wow.
But I don't want to leave without their blessing. And I remember I was just praying that very often. And there was a point that I had a dream, maybe I don't know how long before I left, before I ended up leaving, but I had a dream, and in the dream, no, it wasn't a dream. It was like an impression. I felt very happy. I felt very joyful. My parents they were genuinely supporting me and like sending me to the airport, and they were so happy and they were so joyful. And I had that vision, and I was like, okay, God, did I have that vision?
Right.
I hope it happens. And then it gave me a little peace to my
Mhm.
heart, because I was like, okay, God, I didn't just get that vision for nothing, you know? And a week before I had to leave, 1 week before I had to leave, a pastor, woman pastor, came to visit from Honduras, and she didn't know that I was leaving. She didn't know anything about. She knew me, but she didn't know anything about my current life situation.
Right.
And she came to have dinner at our house, and afterwards, she wanted to pray for each of us, me and my siblings and my parents. And as she was praying for me, she says that she had this vision where she saw me in a really, really big room, and that I was worshiping God. And then as I was worshiping God, the Holy Spirit was coming up and down into the people and things like that. And immediately when she says that, I had my eyes open, and because we were done praying at that point, but she was just talking about this vision, so we all
Mhm.
had our eyes open. And immediately as she starts talking, I just start smiling with the biggest smile, because I'm like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know what room that is. I knew, because the church my church here
Mhm.
has a really big auditorium, so I knew physically that that's the place that she was talking about. I was like, yeah, I know. And
Right.
my parents look at her, and this lady didn't know anything
Mhm.
that I was leaving a week later, and my parents look at her, and it's like finally the confirmation that they needed from God, that this is from Him, you know?
Wow.
And I'm like, literally one word from one lady had to come from another country for you to finally believe that this was Him.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this lady didn't know nothing,
Yeah,
nothing.
exactly.
So, yeah, literally from that day, it was a week before I left, and I was like, are you serious, God? Literally, I had to suffer all this time, and not until a week before I leave, you
Mhm.
finally show up. I'm like, okay, but I guess this is for something. You were teaching us
Right.
something.
Yeah.
So yeah, then after that, my dad spoke to the church leaders, and he tried, because he wanted the church to donate to me monthly, but he didn't want to make that his own decision. He wanted it,
Mhm.
because obviously,
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
he's not going to make that decision just because he's the pastor. So yeah, and then I got support from them, and then I told that Sunday, yeah, I'm leaving, bye. uh and everyone else was like, what? But
Yeah.
like, this had been like a years long process for me. It was no surprise to me, but obviously
Right.
you
To
don't tell
everybody
people.
else,
So
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that's the story.
Wow, that's amazing. And now let me talk to me about like your exercising on your ministry. Once you arrived to the Netherlands, what was the immediate thing that you started doing? Like, what was the work?
Yeah, so when I first moved here, it was very like, it was like question marks in my brain the whole time,
Mm-hmm.
because God had, in the process of me actually before I moved here, God had revealed to me that I would serve within the youth ministry, something that I never wanted to do before, because I didn't really like teenagers. But so I told the pastor, hey, God told me that I'm gonna serve within the youth ministry. So he's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, cool, well, whatever God wants. So immediately when I came, I was plugged into that. And then also, I was going to serve within the worship ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So the church was still a church plant, which means that like it was brand new, the church. So it needed, you know,
Yeah.
other than
Members.
people, it needed to know like how to like figure out how to have the worship sets,
Mm-hmm.
how to, yeah, what the youth ministry is going to look like, things like that. But when I first got here, I had more than anything, I had a lot of like trainings on uh, personal leadership development, which is one of our courses that we have here. Basically, how can I use what God has naturally gifted me with, and also the spiritual gifts, to like build His church here
Mm-hmm.
in this city, in this context. And so yeah, through all those different courses, I started feeling like having the imposter syndrome, like I'm the
Yeah.
youngest one in this room, everyone else is like so much older, like I
Wow.
feel so unqualified, I feel so like not deserving to be here, but I knew that God was the one that brought me there, so I'm like, okay, God, I'm just
Yes.
going to trust you. So yeah, I was doing a lot of with youth ministry, a lot with the worship ministry, which I still do now. But now I'm the youth pastor, and me and my husband. And
Nice.
before I was just, well, I was learning how to do things, so I couldn't necessarily be. I was immediately on leadership, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because of my just
Right.
my life experience, and it was just what happened. But yeah, basically at first it was a lot of learning how to disciple people, how to talk to people about God. At this point, I'm not shy to talk about God anymore. I want people to know
Yeah.
about God. So learning also the Dutch language, that was also has also been interesting. So yeah, a lot of learning when I first got here, and
Mm-hmm.
it was maybe, but immediately I was put to work with going to talk to people, going to visit people, seeing, having meetings with like women, and yeah, I remember it was about 3 months later after I moved there, I had the realization with God of like, wow, God, like nothing compares to this feeling that I have of being in your will, because it's so fulfilling seeing people know him, seeing people's lives being transformed. And not that Gabby like helped in that, but Gabby let
Mm-hmm.
God use her to help in that, and like there's nothing more fulfilling.
Yeah, amen. And also, we almost wrapping up, but do you have a specific,
Yeah.
you have a specific like testimony that you can like see the where you say, "Wow, God really used me in this area," or like a story that you have been able to kind of like be the one that helped through that process, kind of like you said, being a vessel of God use.
Yeah. So I serve with a lot. I work with a lot of women here that have a lot of different backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
and more, God is reminding me that this is kind of where He wants me to continue serving. But I also serve within a lot of younger girls, so with
Mm-hmm.
the teenagers as well. Um, a lot of people just want to feel heard. A lot of people just want to have someone that cares about them and that is willing to listen to them, And I've seen in a lot of times where, like, maybe this doesn't seem so spiritual, but it is spiritual because I have to be connected to God for
Right.
God to speak through me, in different situations and in different moments. And I've seen how me spending time with some of these women has brought them closer to God and also have a better understanding of who God is, and like it's not just me, but a lot of us at our church, we're very, like, we disciple a lot of people, and like we've seen how many lives of people in our church have changed from like being a drug addict. Like that's very normal to see drug addicts in our church that are now fully serving God and worshiping Him, and their lives are completely transformed, and they're bringing all the people that they knew in their past to come and know God.
Nice.
It's very normal for like the prostitutes to like come and know God because they've been transformed by
Mm-hmm.
the power of the Holy Spirit, and now they want to do the same. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I um
Having a
because it's
specific.
it's all God.
Right.
It's all God. But it's really cool to see what God is doing through our church and through every one of us. With me, I've also had these close encounters with people that have had really hard, dark backgrounds, and now they're free, like to serve Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was just there, but I was his vessel, but it was
Right.
all him. And it's really cool to see that the power of Jesus, the power of the blood is so, so, so real that like nothing in hell, nothing that the enemy wants to do, like can ever work or fight against or win against
Right.
like the plan that God has for each of us.
Yeah.
So
No.
yeah, it's
Amen.
been really
Amen.
cool.
Amen. Well, Gabby, I feel that we finally hit our mark. We probably went a little over, but you know what? That's fine. It's been amazing hearing your whole entire story, and I feel like hopefully the many people that are listening are able to kind of like feel and understand and kind of like feel that they're not alone as well. So if there's any particular that you want to say to everyone that is listening.
Yeah, I would just say that whatever God puts on your heart, whatever He clearly tells you to do, whatever dream that He's given you, you know, He is worthy to be trusted, and He would not just say things just to say them, provided it's really God, because
Right.
sometimes we think it's other people. But just don't be afraid to step out and do whatever God is asking you to do, because He will come through in the end, and He will fulfill your desires you didn't even know you had. And that's only because you trusted Him and you obeyed Him, like it says in the word that what does it say, that if we seek Him, that que todo lo que él cuando lo buscamos a él y lo ponemos de primero, que todo lo demás vendrá de añadidura.
Buscar el reino de Dios.
So yeah, it's true, it's 100% true. And all you have to do is just love Him and just obey Him, and you will see how He exceeds all our expectations.
Amen. So, amen. Well, thank you, Gabby, one more time for being here, for taking your own time to share your testimony with all of us. It has been a wonderful time, and I just want to thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for watching this episode. Tell us how you feel about Gabby's testimony. I hope that you guys share and like, and leave us your comment on how you feel about her testimony. So thank you guys for watching one more time, and I will see you in the next episode. God bless y'all. Good? Good? Yeah! All right.
You better comment. I'm just kidding.